Hi, this is Chris Young. Welcome to a special episode of Contemplating Life. Back in episode 75, I set myself the goal of writing a brief review of every new TV show that premiered from September through November this year. I accumulated a list of 31 shows. I did several of them in episode 75. I intended to do a new review episode about every other week until I was done. But I got on a roll with writing my regular autobiographical podcasts, and some of the TV shows were so good I had to binge watch the entire season. So I'm now just getting around to finishing up the remaining reviews. I was going to make this one big long episode, but after doing a bunch of editing, I realized it was just too long, so we're going to split this into Part A and Part B. So here's Part A. Unfortunately, many of these shows will receive my lowest two ratings, either skip it or worthless. But there's some I'm going to highly recommend. So let's get rid of a bunch of the stinkers first. For some reason, I've never been a big fan of Fox's Sunday evening animated series. I've probably only seen one or two episodes of The Simpsons. I appreciate it's highly popular. It's run for 36 seasons. It's earned 37 Primetime Emmy Awards. But for some reason, it never appealed to me. I know that other Fox animated series have been very popular as well, most notably Family Guy, but I've never seen it. So I'm probably not well qualified to be objective about the newest entry in the lineup, a show called Universal Basic Guys. The premise is that a bunch of guys got laid off from work, and as a severance package, they were awarded guaranteed universal basic income. Other than the title of the show and an opening sequence explaining the premise, the concept of UBI never came up in the first episode. It seems it's just a gimmick to explain a bunch of guys who sit around with nothing to do all day except come up with some sort of harebrained schemes. In the first episode, our lead character, Hank, tries to do his wife a favor. She's upset that the local country club does not admit women, and she wants to play golf there. He cooks up a scheme to get her admitted to the club so she can play golf. But it turns out that the members' wives want to keep the club male only, to keep their husbands occupied so they can pursue more important feminist agendas. It's not very funny. It doesn't work as social commentary. I'm sure that other Fox animated series are more entertaining. We're giving this one a big, fat, worthless rating. I'm similarly unqualified to be objective about the next entry from Fox, something called Rescue High Surf. This is basically a ripoff of Baywatch, but it's set in Hawaii. It follows the lives of a bunch of lifeguards who cover the beaches of the North Shore and rescue people in trouble in the high surf. While the action sequences of the rescues are well done and exciting, you can't help but feel it's going to be the same thing week after week. I mean, how many different ways can a surfer get in trouble and be rescued? The characters are thinly drawn. The only plot is a politician who holds the purse strings over the program insists that his son be hired as a lifeguard. Wow, how compelling. No, not really. If you're desperate to see beautiful people running around in bathing suits, go watch the new ABC series, Dr. Odyssey. We gave a bad review of it last time. It's not any good either, but it's better than this. I'm giving this one a strong skip it, bordering on worthless. I hate to trash Fox continuously, but I also gave the new police procedural, Murder in a Small Town, a hard pass. The title tells you everything you need to know. I watched the opening episode about a week ago, and I've already forgotten what it was about. They solved the murder, so there's going to be a new case every week. There's nothing to see here. Again, we'll rate this one skip it, bordering on worthless. Let's take a quick look at several new game shows. CW Network offers Trivial Pursuit, hosted by LeVar Burton, who was recently rejected as a possible host of Jeopardy! Now, I had no problem with his ability to host that iconic game show, even though I really like Ken Jennings, who is the new permanent host. I have no problem with Burton hosting this show. But this show is extremely boring. The pace is too slow, and the questions are either trivially easy or ridiculously difficult. I'm giving it a strong skip it. I was even less impressed by CW's other adaptation of the board game Scrabble. While I enjoy playing the game, watching other people play it is incredibly boring. You're never going to find yourself saying, "They played the wrong word. They could have scored higher if they had spelled something else." Host Raven Simone is adequate, but brings nothing interesting to the effort. Give this one another strong rating of skip it. Only slightly less boring is Amazon Prime's new Are You Smarter Than a Celebrity? While I greatly enjoyed the original Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader, this spin-off that uses adult celebrity helpers rather than fifth-grade children lacks all of the charm of the original. It might be better if they used celebrity kids to help adult contestants, rather than adult celebrities helping the contestants. The format is identical to the original fifth-grader game. Contestants answer questions ranging from first through fifth-grade levels. Host Travis Kelce brings nothing interesting to the effort, and I doubt that his relationship with Taylor Swift will draw viewers to this show, even though she vastly increased the viewership of Kansas City Chiefs NFL games. Unless she shows up as one of the celebrity helpers, I doubt the Swifties will tune in. Kelce lacks the charm and the humor of the original fifth-grader host Jeff Foxworthy. Speaking of Kelce, he is a better game show host than he is an actor. He has a minor part in the Hulu series Grotesquerie. His performance there was grossly inadequate and amateurish. So, let's talk about Grotesquerie. I'm not a huge fan of the horror genre, but this one caught my attention from the beginning, and I had high hopes for it. It stars Niecy Nash as Detective Lois Tryon, who's trying to solve a series of bizarre homicides in which the killer leaves the bodies staged in bizarre tableaus filled with religious symbolism. She's accompanied by a young nun who is a reporter for a Catholic newspaper and website. Her true crime articles about this bizarre serial killer not only increase the readership of her website, but also boost attendance at local churches. The show is highly reminiscent of the NBC series Hannibal, which ran for 39 episodes from 2013 to 2015. That series covered the early days of the killing career of iconic character Dr. Hannibal Lecter, brilliantly portrayed by Mads Mikkelsen. I really enjoyed Hannibal, and I was ready to declare this a worthy successor. This is a compelling mystery with excellently written episodes and deeply drawn characters with despicable flaws. With the exception of Kelce, there are quality performances throughout. I found Grotesquerie so disturbing, I actually had a nightmare about it. Throughout the first 6.5 episodes of the series, I wondered if there was going to be a supernatural component to the story. After all, the series was co-created by Ryan Murphy, who's known for his excellent series, American Horror Story. So it wasn't going to surprise me if there was a supernatural plot element. I've only seen 8 of the 12 seasons of American Horror Story, but my favorite was season 7, which contained absolutely no supernatural elements. Often real life can be more terrifying than demons and witches. Episode 7 of Grotesquerie introduces a plot twist that completely upends the entire story. By the end of the series, in episode 10, you'll be totally confused. Although I think I understand, quote, what really happened, end quote, the entire thing was such a disappointment that it left a really bad taste in my mouth. It turns out to be another version of a horror trope that I never really liked in any of its other implementations, and this one did nothing to change my opinion. I won't spoil it by telling you what trope I'm talking about. Had I written this review prior to episode 7, I would have given it a strong I'm watching it rating. But all I can say at this point is that I watched it and I don't think it was worth the time. Your mileage may vary. Let's officially downgrade this to skip it. Now, by the way, I love a good plot twist, but when the twist reveals that the story is deliberately deceiving the audience, rather than just setting up a mystery or a big reveal, I cannot help but feel betrayed. And while we're on the topic of betraying the audience, I want to talk briefly about the 2022 Netflix film On the Line, starring Mel Gibson. Now, first of all, let me say I've always been able to separate the art from the artist, so no matter how I feel about Gibson as a person, I've always been able to enjoy his work, both as a director and an actor. He gives a quality performance in this deeply flawed film. Gibson plays a late-night radio talk show host that takes phone calls from listeners. Someone calls in and claims to have kidnapped his wife and daughter. We eventually learn he's holding them in the office building where the radio studio is located. Gibson and a new employee who runs the control room start searching the empty office building. Along the way, they find the bad guy has killed a security guard and a janitor. As the show reaches its climax, there's a plot twist that will leave you extremely angry. I won't hint at what it is. And just when you are about to forgive them for tricking you with this ridiculous twist, and you think the movie is back on track, there's another twist guaranteed to piss you off again. Now, I tried to explain these twists away, saying that the characters in the film were heartless people who toy with each other's emotions. But ultimately, the real victim is you, the audience, that is toyed with throughout the film. Going back to the horror genre for a moment, and back to our TV reviews, we have the Peacock TV series Teacup. It's described as a horror sci-fi thriller in which a group of neighbors are trapped in a farm in rural Georgia and must put aside their differences and unite in the face of a mysterious and deadly threat. It stars Yvonne Strahovski, who was recently seen as one of the villains in A Handmaid's Tale, and Scott Speedman, who's known for playing Dr. Nick Marsh on Grey's Anatomy for 37 episodes. Somehow I managed to struggle through the first episode, but it took multiple attempts. I'm hoping that because IMDb described it as sci-fi, that it's some sort of alien invasion rather than demonic possession. But I couldn't get far enough into the show to find out even the basic premise. That description that says people are trapped on a farm, like a bug trapped under a teacup presumably, is only apparent early in the second episode, which I couldn't stand watching. I'll be generous and rate it a solid skip it rather than worthless, because there is the tiniest possibility it could get better. It runs just 8 episodes, so maybe if you have more patience than I do, you can figure it out. But the pacing is so slow that it's unbearable, and I just couldn't stand it. I suppose getting burnt on grotesquerie shied me away from giving this one much of a chance. Moving along, while I really enjoy reality competition shows like Survivor and Amazing Race, I've never been a fan of the so-called reality shows like The Real Housewives or The Kardashians. CW Network has a new series called The Wranglers, described as a documentary charting the lives of ranch employees in Montana, navigating personal relationships and work duties at the Circle Bar Dude Ranch. This has to be the most phony reality show I've ever seen. In case you're unaware, the Dude Ranch is where city slickers go on vacation to experience allegedly authentic cowboy life. The cast of wranglers, ranch managers, and other staff are overwhelmingly female. And while that's commendable, it could hardly be considered an authentic representation of traditional classic cowboy life. The job title of a head wrangler has an opening, so the staff is going to be competing for the new position. The previews hint that there are going to be romantic entanglements among the staff. The whole thing simply reeks of fake situations created by the producers. Let's call this one a strong skip it, unless you're the kind of person who would go to a dude ranch but can't afford it. Now that wraps up most of the really bad ones. Let's move on to something slightly more interesting. CW Network has a new series called Joan, based on the real-life exploits of British thief Joan Harrington, who is known in some circles as the Godmother. It stars Sophie Turner, best known for playing Sansa Stark in Game of Thrones, and Frank Delane, who played Nick Clark in 44 episodes of Fear the Walking Dead. Turner plays Joan, an ordinary British single mother whose boyfriend is a small-time criminal. Fearing for her daughter's safety, she turns over the girl to Child Protective Services, telling them that she is homeless and cannot care for her daughter. She gets a job working at a jewelry store and has the opportunity to make off with a handful of diamonds. She tries to sell the diamonds to an antique dealer named Boise, played by Delane. They fall in love and begin working on bigger jobs. We're supposed to sympathize with Joan, who is turning to this life of crime so she can establish herself financially and get her daughter back from authorities. Personally, I don't feel that much sympathy for her. Had she made some smarter choices and stayed legitimate, she would have had a better chance of getting her daughter back. But now, enjoying the fruits of a life of crime seems to be more of a motivating factor than regaining the custody of her daughter. I've seen 3 of the 6 episodes, and so far I'm giving it a very weak rating if I'm watching. But I'm doing it more out of curiosity to see what happens, not because it's a compelling story. Next, let's take a look at some sitcoms. Maybe we can find something to laugh about here. NBC Peacock TV brings us St. Denis Medical. Now, I've never been a big fan of the mock documentary format, in which the story is interrupted by the characters talking to an unseen interviewer. It worked for Modern Family, but I've never cared for any of the other implementations of the gimmick, such as in The Office. It's not just the format that stinks here. Sadly, this works better as a drama than it does as a comedy. I'm not talking about the kind of mix of comedy and drama that we saw in a series like MASH, which could get uproariously silly, but then there would be a poignant moment to reflect the dire circumstances of the setting. This show tries to be funny, but it isn't. and when it goes for poignant, it almost works. But it fails so miserably at the comedy that it's not worth waiting for the touching parts. I'm giving this one a strong skip it. Next, CBS and Paramount Plus bring us George and Mandy's First Marriage. It's a spin-off from Young Sheldon, which in turn was a spin-off from The Big Bang Theory. Now, I've never missed a single episode of Big Bang Theory, and I must admit I'm about a season and a half behind on Sheldon, but I've been catching up. In this series, Montana Jordan reprises his role as George Cooper, big brother to Sheldon. His wife, Mandy, is played by Emily Osment, who appeared in 39 episodes of Young Sheldon. I don't particularly recall her because George had lots of girlfriends in the series, and as I mentioned, I'm way behind. My guess is that there was an episode of Young Sheldon that served as a put-in pilot for this series. It seems to hit the ground running, assuming you already know that the young couple and their newborn baby is living with her parents. Mandy has such a difficult relationship with her mother that at first I wasn't really sure it was her mother, but perhaps a stepmom. In the opening episode, after a feud with her mom, in which the mother questions George's intelligence, the couple moves out and tries to make it on their own. By the end of the episode, they make up and move back in with her parents. Now, my number one criterion for a sitcom is it has to make me laugh. And I may have chuckled once or twice, but I can't remember what. We'll be generous and call this one could be watchable. However, given that I'm a huge fan of the two parent shows, I'm severely disappointed. I think I rather would have seen a spin-off series on Sheldon's sister Missy. I thought she was a more interesting character. Next up, NBC is keeping Reba McEntire busy these days. In addition to her role as a coach and mentor on The Voice, she returns to scripted television in a new sitcom called Happy's Place. In this series, she plays Bobby, a woman who just inherited a diner from her father, who had the nickname Happy. As she's trying to manage the restaurant while dealing with the loss of her father, she discovers she has a half-sister she never knew about, who is now co-owner of the facility. The character McIntyre is playing has the same perky personality as her own, so there's no stretch acting involved here at all. I never saw her previous self-titled sitcom, so I really can't compare this. But if you're expecting something different, I don't think you'll find it here. If I laughed, I don't recall at what, but I'll be generous and give this one a week. Could be watchable, but it's not for me. A slightly better choice, if you're looking for a new sitcom, might be Papa's House. Damon Wayans plays Damon Papa Fulton, who's a radio personality. He's forced to take on a female psychologist as a new sidekick on his popular radio show in an attempt to attract a more diverse audience. At home, he has to deal with his son, Damon Jr., played by Dan Waymans Jr. Was the writing team so untalented they couldn't come up with a fictitious name for these characters? Or were the Wayans such bad actors they couldn't remember to refer to one another by their character names consistently? Draw your own conclusions. That said, the show did have some laughs, and both stars have proven their comedic talents in other venues, and you can see them shine in this open-ended situation, which essentially lets them play themselves. I'll give this one a stronger, could be watchable, but I don't have room for it in my busy viewing schedule. You might want to check it out and see if it appeals to you. The only other comedy that has potential is Disney Channel's Wizards Beyond Waverly Place. As best I can tell, this is a spin-off of The Wizards of Waverly Place, which ran for 106 episodes from 2007 to 2012. I've never seen the original. David Hurney reprises his role as Justin Russo, who in this series has decided to give up his wizardly powers and live the normal life of a mortal. His wife and children have no idea about his magical past. Life gets turned upside down when his sister Alex, played by Selena Gomez, brings him a young girl named Billy, who is a talented wizard in training. Apparently, Justin was a teacher at a wizard school in the previous series. Along the way, Billy conjures up a silly monster to impress Justin's children, and then can't figure out how to put it back from wherever it came from. Although the kids now know that Billy is a wizard, they remain clueless about their father's abilities, as does his wife. Now, this Disney Channel series is clearly aimed at a young audience, and I think it'll do well with them, as well as fans of the original series. It shows a lot of potential. Let's call this one Recommended Watchable, which means if you like this kind of thing, I can recommend it. But personally, I will not be watching. While we're on the topic of watchable kids shows, Max streaming service has a CGI animated kids show called Barney's World, featuring the iconic purple dinosaur. As I understand it, only kids can see Barney, and he has the ability to transport them to fantasy situations that only they can experience. The show's full of positive life lessons about being responsible, cooperative, and helpful, along with a small dose of positive vibes about diversity. If you're strongly anti-woke, then you're already probably out protesting the show right now. But for reasonable parents, the show's completely harmless and quite positive. Obviously, it's not for me, but we'll call this one Recommended Watchable for your toddlers. That's going to wrap it up for Part A of this two-part episode. Give me a couple of days to edit Part B, and it will be coming very soon. If you find this podcast educational, entertaining, enlightening, or even inspiring, consider sponsoring me on Patreon for just $5 a month. You'll get early access to the podcast and other exclusive content. I'm not really in this for the money, but every bit helps. As always, my deepest thanks to my financial supporters. That means more to me than I could ever express. And even if you can't provide financial support, post a link just so I can grow my audience. All of my back episodes are available. I encourage you to check them out. If you have any comments, questions, or other feedback, do so wherever you found the podcast. I'll see you next time as we continue contemplating life. Until then, fly safe, everyone.